Welcome to this information session on publishing with the Journal of Western Archives. My name is Gordon Daines. I am the director of the Journal of Western Archives, and I'll be one of the presenters. I'm joined by Ryan Lee, who is the managing editor of the Journal of Western Archives, and Soo-Kim Chung, who is the editorial board representative from the Conference of Intermountain Archivists. We'll be joined later in the presentation by a panel of authors, and I will introduce them at that time. We hope you find this session to be informative and useful, and we look forward to any questions that you might have after you have the opportunity to view this presentation. So we're going to start with a brief history of the Journal of Western Archives. For those of you that are interested in a more in-depth history, if you go to the first issue of the Journal of Western Archives, I've written an article that describes the ins and outs, the struggles, and the opportunities that led to the formation of the Journal of Western Archives. That article is called Tilting Windmills, and again, it's in the very first issue of the journal. But in a nutshell, I conceived of the idea of the Journal of Western Archives when I was a graduate student at Western Washington University, mostly because as I read journals like the American Archivist and Archivaria, I didn't see many Western authors, and I wanted to create a venue and an opportunity for Western authors to feel comfortable and confident publishing about issues relevant to them and to their archival associations. In 2002, I had the opportunity to serve on the council for the Conference of Intermountain Archivists and convinced them to put together a journal task force. That task force did a lot of legwork, looked into establishing a journal. At the time, it was envisioned that it would be a print journal. We had conversations with the Northwest Archivists, Inc., Society of California Archivists, and others. In the end, we decided not to pursue the creation of a journal just because we couldn't figure out the finances for a print journal. In 2007, I had the opportunity to attend a conference in Houston where I was introduced to a number of digital platforms for publishing online journals. And I thought, well, maybe we can revisit the notion of a journal for Western Archives. I pulled together a group of colleagues here at Brigham Young University, and we began investigating the possibility. We put together a business plan, we reached out to who we had identified as potential sponsors, and got positive feedback. We also talked to the library administration here at BYU about potentially hosting a digital journal. They weren't in a position to do so, and so we started looking around with the encouragement of our sponsors for an institution that had access to a digital platform. Eventually, we were put in contact with Archivists Utah State University. They had just installed an instance of bepress and were using Digital Commons as their digital collections repository, but part of bepress is a journal publishing platform. And they were interested and agreed to be our host, and they continue to host the Journal of Western Archives. We put in a lot of work trying to figure out, okay, what are next steps? And in 2010, the journal finally became a reality. We put together our first editorial board that consisted of members from the Society of California Archivists, a representative from the Conference of Intermountain Archivists, the Society of Rocky Mountain Archivists, and the Northwest Archivists, Inc., as well as a representative from Utah State University. The editorial board put together the policies and the procedures for governing the journal. And in April of that year, 2010, we launched the journal at the Western Roundup meeting held in Seattle, Washington. The first issue came out later that summer and features articles talking about the journal, but also articles from some prominent authors in the Western United States. So that's a little bit of the backstory and history of the journal. I'm going to turn the presentation over now to Soo-Kim Chung, who's going to talk a little bit about the journal and its connections to regional archival associations.
Great. I'm hoping that I'm talking and it shows me, but I don't see myself, but maybe I am. As Gordon noted in the previous slide, our editorial board has members, our editorial board features members from all of the 4 regional archival associations: Intermountain Archivist, Rocky Mountain, Northwest, and California Archivist, which shows what a collaborative effort it is. And it means that every organization has a voice in the journal. I don't know, every organization does have, like, there is a monetary donation they make, and so that there is every organization has a voice, and so you should know that it's a collaborative effort. And that means that, you know, when and it's great for in terms of the issues that are the articles that are submitted for peer review, that you know that they're going to be peer reviewed by a jury of your peers, so to speak. And that's one of the best things about the journal, is that it is a collaborative effort from the Western region. And that's one of the most valuable things about the journal. As Gordon noted, we want to be representative of the Western region. And so you know that your articles that are going to be focused on the West are going to be viewed by people in the editorial board who come from the West. So. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about the types of articles that we publish. JWA is very, eclectic in terms of the material that it accepts, but also we take traditional research articles, with the research question, literature review, methodology, etc. And again, you see the page count there, case studies of work that you might have done at your institution. And works in progress. If you're doing a study, or perhaps you have a grant project that you're working on, and you want to talk a little bit about before it gets to its completion stage, we also, those are also great content for JWA. Review essays, typical of different, if you're reviewing maybe perhaps a series of books on, say, appraisal or another archival concept, that would be a great content article for JWA. And also book reviews, again, 3 to 4 pages. So you can see the depth of research starting from, say, a research article, case study, down to book review. So we'll get into this later, but if you're just sort of starting out, maybe you want to do a book review, because it's a smaller commitment from you, and maybe not as scary as doing a full-on research article. And we'll get to talking about that later on with our authors at the end.
Okay, I think it's my turn to talk. So you may be thinking, I have an idea for something, or maybe you've never even published before, and this may be your first time, and we're just not familiar with that process. And so my goal today, for this part of the presentation, is to kind of maybe alleviate some of that anxiety and that's the unknowns about that process, and help you become a little more familiar with that, and how we at the Journal of Western Archives go through the process of receiving and making decisions on submissions. So before submitting a manuscript draft for review, you should review the policies and guidelines, which are available online at the addresses listed on the screen. The policies include information such as who can submit, general submission rules, formatting requirements, the editorial process, rights for authors, attribution and usage policies of published articles, and general terms and conditions of use. The style guide provides further details regarding formatting requirements for submissions. These are very important to follow, and doing so will reduce the number of edits you'll need to make in the end. One item to note is the article length. While we prefer that authors stay within a page range, the page range is mentioned, since Journal of Western Archives is an online journal, we can be flexible in that regard if needed. And so just be aware of that. And as stated in the policies page of the website, if you were to go there, the Journal of Western Archives uses a rigorous blind peer review process. There are basically 4 individuals involved in this process. Each submission is initially reviewed by the managing editor. If the managing editor determines that the submission fits the scope of the journal and meets the basic requirements, the submission is then assigned to a member of the editorial board for a full peer review. The board member selects 2 community peer reviewers to do a review of the article. Once the peer reviewers complete the review and submit their responses, the editorial board member summarizes the peer review feedback and provides their own review. The managing editor then uses these reviews to make a decision regarding acceptance of the article and crafts a response back to the authors. The process is single blind because the authors do not know who is doing the peer review, although they are they are allowed to see an anonymized copy of the full review from each peer reviewer. Next page. The managing editor has basically 3 options for deciding whether to accept a submission or not. The 3 options are accept with minor revisions, accept with major revisions, and reject submission. There's also the option to accept a submission without any revisions, but this is very rarely used. While most of these decisions are made after a full review, on occasion, a submission may be rejected by the managing editor for being so far out of the scope of the journal that a full review would not be warranted. Major revisions usually include major changes to the content of the article or would require a large amount of additional research. The most common response is accept with minor revisions, where the focus is providing 4 to 5 recommendations for strengthening the article. Now, you may be wondering, how long does this review process take? You may have some deadlines that you're trying to hit. And so to maybe help answer that question, once peer reviewers have accepted the request to review a submission, they have 3 weeks to complete the review. They will be alerted through the journal submission system when a deadline is approaching. The editorial board member assigned to review the article is alerted when all the reviews are completed, and then they submit their response and assign the article back to the managing editor, which acts as an alert indicating that all reviews have been completed and the submission is now ready for a decision. We try to get all of that done within about 2 months and are usually able to hit the mark. Often we are able to do that even in less time. Once the decision has been made and the authors have been contacted, we then wait until the authors have submitted the recommended changes. Since this can take time, we try and contact the authors on occasion just to follow up and make sure that they are still planning to submit a revised article. Most of the time they are, but if they're not, or we do not receive a response after several attempts, submissions are removed from the system. Once a revised version of a submission is received, the managing editor then reviews the new version again to determine if it is ready to be published. If the initial decision was to accept with major revisions, the managing editor may want to assign the editorial board or board member over the initial review to also review the revised version to make sure the recommendations were addressed. This usually does not take more than a week or 2 at the most. Once it is determined that the revised version is ready for the next step, the managing editor submits the article for copy editing. For copy editing, we use a third-party professional copy editor. This person usually only takes 2 to 3 weeks to complete their work, although it depends on the complexity of the article. Once this work is completed, the copy editor will return the article with suggested edits using track changes and comments inserted into the document. Comments are usually directed to the authors with questions or comments that need to be addressed. If there are comments, the managing editor will send the copy edited version to the authors for review and ask for responses to these comments. Once all issues have been addressed and all suggested edits accepted, the article is sent to the graphic designer to format the article to prepare it for publication. Once the article has been formatted for publication, the authors are given one final chance to review the article and give approval to have the article published. We cannot publish any article without the authors giving this final approval. And as soon as final approval is received from the authors, the article can then be published immediately. Being an online journal, we publish as soon as something is ready. A URL to the article is sent to the authors so that they can start sharing the link with others or put it on their CV. So that's just a brief overview of that process, and I hope that answered any questions you might have. Now back to Gordon.
Thanks, Ryan. One of the things I hope you noticed as both Sue Kim and Ryan were talking is the underlying philosophy of the journal. We want to help you get published. We want you to be able to take your good ideas, your thoughts, your case studies, the different things you're working on, or presentations that you've given at conferences, and turn them into articles. Because of that underlying philosophy, as Ryan described, we're really willing to work hard with you to get your article through the peer review process and to get it published. One of the things I really love about the journal is watching new authors have the opportunity to kind of go through the process and to see how their work is improved, and to kind of see the satisfaction they have as your article gets published, or your book review or work in progress, or whatever it is that you've decided that you want to do. The other part of our philosophy is we want your research to be available in a timely fashion. And so as Ryan described, we have a fairly streamlined process, and we try and get things through our workflow as quickly as we can. And we love the fact that we're an online journal that can publish as we receive things. And sometimes that means when we publish our first issue, it has an article and a book review. But then by the end of the year, it's been fleshed out and there's additional content. And so as you get your articles in and as you work through our process with us, then it becomes available as soon as it's done, instead of having to wait until our next print issue becomes available. The other thing I guess I'll say, as Ryan mentioned, we have a fairly high acceptance rate. That does not mean that we have low quality. Because of the work that we are willing to put in as an editorial board, and because of the peers that do the review work for us, every article that comes through the JWA is rigorously reviewed, and the author has an opportunity to learn and to improve, and they have the opportunity to work with individuals who want them to succeed. We, as Ryan mentioned, we give you lots of feedback, and we give you lots of opportunity to revise your work. And it can begin as early as an email to the editor saying, hey, I've got this idea, what do you think about it? The editor will let you know what they think about it, whether they think it fits. And then as Ryan described, we'll walk you through the publication process, and we will give you opportunities to review, revise, resubmit, respond to copy editors, respond to peer reviewers. The publishing process can seem very daunting. And because of that, and because a lot of the authors that publish with JWA are first-time authors, we really walk you through the process. We want you to be successful, and we want to do what we can to help you be successful. So how do you get started? I'm going to toss it back to Ryan, and he's going to describe kind of the process.
Right. Yeah. So if you're out there just wanting to publish, but you're just not sure where to start, we have a few simple tips that hopefully can help you get started and get you on that track. First, and this is easy for me to do, and you may be the same way, but don't overcomplicate it or overthink it. There are so many different things you could publish about that could be connected to your own interests or work that could just be a natural outgrowth of your day-to-day job. And so I always try to tell people to kind of think of those things if you're looking for something to publish. So it doesn't have to be an extra burden or an extra, just something added on to what you normally do. If you're having a hard time coming up with ideas, do a brainstorming session, either by yourself or with a colleague that you might work closely with. Think about aspects of your job that you're most interested in or spend the most time doing, and those which you enjoy researching more about. Working with a colleague who could be a potential co-author is always a plus. Not only is it nice to have someone to share the workload with, but it's also good to have someone else there to push you along and keep you motivated. And that can always be a problem as you're writing and researching. Just keeping going and getting to that end. Base your research around your work, as I mentioned before. We all have projects we work on that we often spend days, weeks, months, even years on. And maybe your institution's trying out a new process or software that you're involved in implementing. There could be a myriad of things out there. And people, we in the archivist community, we love learning from our colleagues. And this is one way that we can share what we're doing and learn from each other. Think of ways that you can take that work and turn it into a case study or a certain aspect of archival work that others could learn from. Or you could even start smaller and volunteer to create a review essay, or even, as Sue Kim mentioned, a book review. And if you're interested in those book reviews, you can contact Gordon. And we're always looking for volunteers to review new books on archival topics. And finally, if you have an idea but are looking for potential collaborators, we've created a spreadsheet where you can record your ideas or look for ideas that have been shared by others. The link is here. It's just a simple Google Doc, but we've also put it on our website, on the journal's website, that you can access it there. This is a great way to know what others are working on or wanting to work on that could even spur ideas of your own and get in contact with a potential co-author. Hopefully that may help get you started in this process, and we look forward to seeing your submissions.
So one of the things that I'll add on with Ryan, a lot of the articles and case studies that I've written have actually been outgrowths of presentations that I've given at conferences. So if you've given a presentation about something at a conference, it really is only a little extra work to turn that into a case study or an article or a work in progress that we would be more than happy to take a look at. So we'd highly encourage you to get together with the people that you put panels together, or if you've given a solo presentation, consider taking those presentations and turning them into articles themselves. And speaking of panels, the journal occasionally likes to do special issues, and these are themed issues. Lately, they've happened every other year. They deal with topics that are of import to the community and the profession. Our first special issue dealt with Native American archives. In fact, two of our most popular articles come from that issue, dealing with Native American archives. We've had a special issue on web archiving. We recently did one on diversity, inclusion, and cultural competency. And our most recent special issue was a result of the cancellation of the Western Archivist meeting because of COVID-19. We reached out to panelists who were interested in sharing their work and encouraged them to turn those panels into articles. And we got some really good content that I'd encourage you to take a look at. The other thing I'd say about special issues, if you have an idea, you think, oh, I'd like to write on this topic, and I have a friend who might want to write on this topic, feel free to reach out to the journal's editor or myself as the director, to Ryan or myself, with your ideas. We would be happy to entertain those ideas. Be aware, if you come to us with an idea, we might invite you to be a guest editor. That's not as daunting as it sounds. It just helps us understand better what it is that you want to get out of the special issue, and gives you an opportunity to help shape and mold the issue and maybe write a short introduction. So if you have ideas for a special issue, please let us know. We will be sending out a survey after the conference season for the regional associations to see if there are topics that have emerged as we've managed to meet together again and discuss the things that are going on now. And we would love to hear your ideas and thoughts. So either reach out to us directly or look for that survey. So that's a quick overview of the journal and the processes that the journal goes through to get articles into publication. What we want to do next is have a panel discussion with some authors who have published in the Journal of Western Archives. I'm going to introduce them now, and then I'll stop my screen share, and we're going to have a Q&A question and answer session. So the authors that we've invited to participate with us are Cindy Shane, who is the Deputy Administrator of Archives and Records for the Nevada State Library Archives and Public Records, Julia Stringfellow, who is a professor and university archivist at Central Washington University, and Danon Scheme, who is the Curator of 21st Century Manuscripts at Brigham Young University. So let me stop my share, and we will have our conversation with our panelists. So let's jump right in. So the first question that I have is, what kind of publishing experience did you have before you published with the Journal of Western Archives? And were you a first-time author?
I can go first. I had published in other journals and submitted book chapters previously to submitting to Journal of Western Archives. And I've heard horror stories of where you submit something to a journal and it takes maybe a year, if ever, when you hear back from them. And so I've been overall really lucky with my publishing experiences. I worked with Collaborative Librarianship and PNLA Quarterly, but submitting to Journal of Western Archives for the first time it still felt pretty daunting.
I guess I will jump in. So yeah, this was the article I did for the Journal of Western Archives was the first article that I had ever done. And so I was brand new with it. It was definitely daunting, but the way they walked me through it was really helpful. But yes, I was a first-time publisher when I did that.
Same for me. It was my first time publishing when I submitted to JWA, and it was definitely a learning experience for me.
Would you mind describing for me what your experience was, and what worked, what didn't work, if anything, with the Journal of Western Archives approach to offering help to authors?
Sure. I think for me, the biggest thing was I didn't understand what was involved with the process, and people walked me through it. The bepress platform was very intuitive. It was easy to know how to submit something when we got instructions to submit something. And the peer review process could have been very intimidating, especially for a first-time author, but the feedback was very constructive and very kind in the way it was delivered. For example, with mine, they could have been very snarky with me and said, "Where's your literature review?" But instead they said, "We can tell that the author is familiar with the literature as cited throughout the thing, but it would greatly benefit if the author would include a literature review." So then, of course, I went home and jumped on there, "What is a literature review?" So it really helped me just to develop as an author, and it was very clear that they wanted me to succeed and to also give me feedback that made my article the best that it could be. So for me, it was a great experience.
Oh, sorry, Julie, you want to go ahead?
Go ahead.
Again, like I was saying earlier, it was a daunting experience, but when I started going through it, the instructions were very clear. It was obvious on what I was supposed to do. It just was me taking the time to sit down and do it and figure it out. I did talk with a couple of the people, Gordon included, on some of the expectations and how to go about it, and very willing to talk to me about it, give me the directions and instructions I needed. The feedback I got was amazing, right? It being the first time I had heard about the horror stories of submitting articles in other places and those kind of mean, snarky, and you know what? Since then I've published elsewhere, and I can attest to the mean and snarky comments that you get. And it wasn't that way at all. It was it was critical. There was critical feedback, which was great. I really looked forward to that, and I used that to make it better. And then they also gave me a lot of encouragement. We thought this area was amazing. And so that was also encouraging, right? So that I felt like, oh yeah, I do want to sit down. I want to redraft this, and I want to make it better. And I can see that what they're providing, the feedback they are providing is constructive feedback. So yeah, it was a great experience.
My experience has been really great as well. When you go in to submit an article, the submission guidelines and criteria are very clear. They're easy to find on the website. Submitting the article, as soon as I submitted it, I received an email confirming it was submitted. So that was reassuring. And then I felt like the process from submitting it to finding out what the reviewers' comments were was very timely. I was amazed at how quickly it seemed to go. And, I'll attest that, yeah, feedback I've received from other publications in the past has often been rather cruelly worded and very discouraging. And with the Journal of Western Archives, the feedback is direct, and it's very professionally written, which I appreciate. It doesn't discourage me from furthering to work on the article and resubmit it. And the fact that it's an open access journal and you don't have to wait for the next issue to come out to see your article published, that's really great, especially if you're up against a deadline for a review coming up and you really need that article published quickly. So it was a really good experience.
Thank you. So would you mind describing for me how publishing with the Journal of Western Archives has opened opportunities for you or helps you advance your career?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start this one if that's okay. So like I said, it was the first one, and I've had some since, but the thing that it really did for me was boost my confidence that, hey, publishing is not impossible. It's not easy. It's definitely time consuming, but it was very rewarding. And so I've had an article published since, and I've got another one that's going to be coming out this fall. And so again, it was for me that boost of confidence to go forward. in the idea of being able to publish and have my name on some article, professional article somewhere out there. It was amazing.
It's helped me in that a criteria of my job here at Central is to do a certain amount of scholarship, and every 5 years we have a post-tenure review evaluation. And so being able to publish in the Journal of Western Archives, and I think from the time that I submitted the article to the time it was published was just a few months, which was great because I was right up against a deadline for submitting my materials for post-tenure review, and it was good to get that article in as well. But that helped me progress my scholarship and meet the required number of scholarly articles I needed to have, and helped me go on to receive merit for post-tenure review, which was great. But then another great thing was that I co-wrote a second article for the Journal of Western Archives with a colleague who had previously not written with them, and it helped spread the word, so to speak, about how professional and timely the publication process is with this journal. And I hope this will help him to go on and consider, publishing another article with Journal of Western Archives.
Like Julia, I was in an environment that required a certain amount of scholarship in order to pass your annual evaluations at work. That was really helpful there. But my very first article with JWA was before I made the academic environment. And having that JWA article on my resume proved to the academic environment that I had the potential to do scholarship, which I think was part of a positive thing for me getting the job. And also, after being an author for JWA, I volunteered as a reviewer. And so, paying it forward a little bit, and also it opened a door for me professionally in that I was then invited to be on the Society of American Archivists Publication Board. So it has advanced my career in that way. And as Julia mentioned, it's also a good opportunity for mentoring new authors. If you have an opportunity to co-author with someone who's never written before, JWA gives them that positive experience for their first time authorship, which I've done a couple of times as well with JWA. It's broadened my opportunities in several ways. And also the fact that it's online and open access, I think has made professional connections for me. I have met people at conferences who have said, "Oh, I read your article. Could we talk about X? Or can we talk about Y?" And I say, "Oh, that would be great." And then I have an opportunity to learn about what they're doing at their institution that's related to the topic. So it's really opened a lot of opportunities.
For those of you that have published multiple times with the Journal of Western Archives, why did you choose to publish with JWA again?
I'll go first this time. So the second article that I published in Journal of Western Archives, I co-wrote with a colleague, and this was going on during the time of COVID and lockdown, and when life was really difficult, and we wanted to publish in a journal that we knew would provide feedback and responses to emails in a timely manner, and that we had a relatively good shot at being published in. And so my first experience publishing with the journal was so positive, and it wasn't stressful like I had imagined it would be. And so that was why I was a return submitter to the journal.
I also have published a couple of times there, as well as in several other places. But the reason I returned to JWA is because the open access that we've talked about. And I often write about technical issues or technical processes, and those do need to be published in a timely manner, or the thing that you talked about is no longer very interesting. So for me, that's timeliness is one of the main factors. Also, we've talked about the peer review process, how it's very thoughtful and it results in a quality article, so you can be proud of what you're putting out there. Also, because the press sends you metrics on your downloads and viewers, you can demonstrate the impact of your work to your employer if you need to do that. And the online environment for me is great because of flexibility. You can publish images, you can put in links to supporting documentation. And as Ryan mentioned earlier, they can be a little bit more flexible about the page limits that they can do. So there's so many reasons to come back to the Journal of Western Archives.
Great. Thank you. The last question that I have, I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Would you recommend publishing in the Journal of Western Archives to colleagues, new authors, returning authors, and why?
I've got a project that I'm working on with a colleague right now, and that is our goal is to have it published through JWA. So absolutely, he's never published before through it that I'm aware of. And so I think it's the first time for him. The other thing I would add that I'm excited about this journal specifically is the focus that it has on the West. And I really like that aspect. And I feel like the article that we're writing fits that category. And so this is one of the main reasons we thought, yeah, we should publish it here because it fits the area we're in. And the audience of this, will be interested in.
I would definitely publish again. I'm currently working on a book review for the journal, but I would certainly recommend this, especially to first-time authors, just because it's such a good experience and it's very encouraging as you proceed with your scholarship. And also the fact that it's focused on the West and related to what we do topically is very encouraging. I'm going to be going on sabbatical next spring, researching local women's history, and I'm positive I'm going to be turning that into some kind of article to submit to Journal of Western Archives.
I can echo everything that everyone has said. You've heard all the reasons that we were excited about it. Yes, I would highly recommend publishing with the Journal of Western Archives. And the bottom line is what Gordon said earlier, they want to help you get published. They want to help you produce the very highest quality work that you are capable of. That is a wonderful experience.
Great. I want to thank our panelists. Hopefully this has given some food for thought for those of you considering publishing with the Journal of Western Archives. We really do want you to succeed and we want to help you succeed. And as you can see from the authors here, I'm going to put the screen back up just because it shows the breadth and depth of the different research that they've done and what they've published with us. Everything from dealing with born digital records to donor relations to teaching. And so wonderful opportunities for you to publish with the Journal of Western Archives. Let me see if I can get this slide to advance. Okay, thank you again for participating and viewing this information session. If any questions have come up, please feel free to reach out to myself, Gordon Daines, at gordon_daines@byu.edu. Again, I'm the director of the journal. You can also feel free to reach out to Ryan Lee, who is our managing editor, and he can be reached at ryan_lee@byu.edu. Again, thank you for your time.